A brief Masonic history. Freemasonry came to North America long before there were countries called the United States or Canada. From its inception, it was based upon moral individuals who believed in brotherhood. The earliest settlers, mainly of Irish, Scottish, or English stock, were eager to embrace Masonry in the New World as part of their heritage from the Old Country. Military units from the British Isles were also posted in the New World. They carried their lodge warrants, issued in Dublin, Edinburgh, and London, and their Masonic regalia from camp to camp. When the colonists joined them as militia volunteers, they were welcomed into the social life of the unit, which included meetings of the military or traveling Masonic lodges. This was the case both in early Canada and in the colonies, which became the United States. No one knows for sure, but many scholars think that Freemasonry had its beginnings among skilled but illiterate stonemasons in medieval Europe, probably in the 15th century. These operative craftsmen built mighty fortresses and magnificent cathedrals. Since they were strangers in the villages where they worked, they lived apart and had their own compound. They took meals together and slept under the same roof. These craftsmen would assemble in their lodgings to discuss problems and plan the next day's work. It was natural that a social order would arise under these circumstances, an order similar to an officer's mess, combining camaraderie and the recognition of rank. In medieval days, long-term projects required craftsmen to establish more permanent lodgings, referred to simply as the lodge. Even today, Freemasons use the term lodge to describe both their meeting place and the group itself. Castles took decades to build. As the landlords grew wealthier, their strongholds grew larger, the armies or retinue of knights increased. Cathedrals took centuries to complete. Like modern homes, both required additions and the older sections needed maintenance. This kept some stonemasons employed, but not all. So after the work was finished, like the engineers and pipeline layers of today, they traveled in search of new projects. The demand for stonemasons was high. As skilled artisans, they could negotiate a good contract, somewhat like professional athletes do today. They carried their skills in their head and their tools in a bag. However, there were no government-sponsored apprenticeship programs, certificates of graduation, nor letters of recommendation, because only the clerics and scribes could read or write. How could an employer know he was getting a workman who was truly skilled? With all these itinerant workers, there had to be some system of recognition. Enter the craft guilds, those precursors of today's trade unions and professional associations. And enter the Masonic Lodge. The itinerant brothers faced the usual perils of the roads, which included robbery and murder, because those were lawless days and many people were desperate. They passed through many settlements on their way to the next cathedral or castle site, usually arriving hungry and in need of shelter. What could be more natural than seeking out a fellow craftsman and asking for help? Tradition tells us that this is the origin of Masonic hospitality, the hand of friendship to a fellow craftsman. And when they arrived at their destination, their fellow craftsmen would offer assistance. How did the stonemasons recognize each other as guild members? Back as far as the Old Testament, passwords were used to get people through military lines. And if someone suggests the concept is archaic or quaint, just remind them that they get into computer programs with a password and into their bank accounts with a PIN number. Our ancient brethren carried a password to gain access to a work site, the same way modern Masons memorize a password to gain access to a lodge. Like your PIN number, it's a secret and not lightly shared. In a tough world, those Masons held together. They had to, because as traveling men, they were far removed from their families and their home villages. If a man were killed on the job, his fellow Masons helped care for his widow and children. It was a type of social insurance before government programs were available. Masons looked out for each other on and off the job. And when the divine right of kings was used as an excuse for tyranny, the Masons held a belief that all men were created equal. As feudalism gave way to nation-states, Masons became less itinerant. Villages no longer needed defenses. Construction moved to the cities where factories were needed because of increased trade. To accommodate this growth, new buildings were needed. The stonemasons settled down, established roots, and their lodges became permanent fixtures in nearly every city. As skilled craftsmen, they were paid high wages and became part of the emerging middle class. Their neighbors couldn't help but notice that they had a pretty good time and a good way of life. And the questions arose, can we join too? The answer was yes. This started the evolution of Masonic lodges from the shapers of stone to the shapers of men. Today, many organizations accept associate members, applicants who agree with the club's ideals and activities. In Masonry, those who did the stonework were called operative Masons, and those who associated with them were called speculative Masons or Freemasons. That, my friend, is who we were then and who we are today. If someone wants to know something about us, we tell him. If he likes what he hears, he might want to join our ranks. Some things in Masonry have changed through the ages. Others remain firm. We call them landmarks. One of them is that a Mason must believe in a supreme being. Also, he must press for the same justice for his neighbors as he expects for himself. These things never change. For more information, please talk to your friend.